Welcome to the Cube series. I was inspired to make these awesome cubes after seeing Crowline's amazing cube pins. They make such amazing art, make sure to check them out. Now I made this series for my first ever art show, along with a bunch of other amazing artists for Strange Cat Toys, and it was so much fun. But everything needed to be small, under 2 inches, and I'm going to make a matching grublet that matches each design and theme. Now, I want to use the same concept I used in my last video, which was the underwater octopus cube. I want to do that, but with a pond. So I just covered my wooden cube in clay and then made a mold of it. And you can see that process in my last video. But here you can see the concept we're going for, just this cool water vibe. Now I'm going to be using some Cosclay for some of my water plants that are going to be sticking out of my cube. I don't want them to snap off, so I need that flexibility, and that's what Cosclay is all about. So making these little weeds are really easy. I just take a rolled up piece of clay, flatten it, and then use a tool to make a line down the middle. And then I spiraled them. And you can see they're going to stick out of the water just a little bit. I went ahead and mixed up some green colors. I'm going to use one green to make a little stem for my lily pad later. And then I'm going to cover my cube in some tin foil, that way I can sculpt right on top of it to get the right size lily pad without it sticking to the wood or the clay. Lily pads are very easy to sculpt. You just start off with a flat circle. I like to add some cutouts that gives it a little bit more realism and character. Sometimes if it's perfectly circular, it looks a little flat and boring. Now we're going to add some lines with our needle tool here. This is giving it some texture and some detail so it doesn't look so flat, and then I like to curl up the edges as well. I'm using a tiny bit of alcohol to get rid of any fingerprints, and then I'm going in with some mica powders to add some shimmer. Now I ended up resculpting my lily pad because I wanted to leave a little room for the reeds that we're making to come through the water. But I used the same concept but just changed it up a tiny bit. Now I'm going to use my favorite metallic paint brand to paint our gray pieces. We want them to be nice and green, and I love the bit of shimmer that it adds. Now for our frog, we're just starting off with this round little guy. He's kind of like a teardrop shape. Then I'm going to take a piece of clay and cut it in half. I like doing that so that I get equal parts of clay and one side doesn't come out bigger than the other. And you can see that this is fairly easy. I just attach them right to the body, and those are going to be our frog's little thighs. And of course, you know, with me, I'm in my booty phase and I have to add booties to everything because it's hilarious. Now I'm doing the same thing that I did for the thighs for the eyes, taking a piece of clay and cutting it in half, and these are going to be where our eyes are going to go, so you want to blend those into the body really well. Why put paws on a frog? I don't know, but we're going to fix that. We're going for more of a simple chibi style, which is just 2 teardrops and then I blend it in. And you can see it looks so much better. The paw feet gotta go. It's weird. And I made much more simple little feet and they look so much better. Sometimes less is more, definitely with this little guy. Now for the eyes, you just want to pre-bake some circles that are hopefully similar in size and use a ball stylus to make the little eye sockets for them to fit into. And if you're me, you're starting to have flashbacks to your last video where you also made the eyes way too gigantic. Like, come on, Nicole, scale. What is happening here? So once I got correctly sized eyeballs, I used some clay adhesive to keep those peepers in their little sockets. And then I used the edge of this awesome little tool that I had to make the perfect little smile, and then I used a needle tool to make it deeper. Now I'm using some clear clay. This is like a clear white translucent clay, and I added some very fine glitter to it to make it extra sparkly because hello, it's a fairy. Now wings are easy. I'm just making teardrop shapes and then sticking them together. Then once they're baked, I make a hole with an Exacto knife so I can slip the little wing right in there without damaging anything. If you just try to push it into the clay, it can leave like a weird indent. Then we're using more clay adhesive to stick our little frog to our lily pad. Now I'm going to use some clay softener to get rid of any fingerprints or dust on my piece, and I'm looking at him and I'm like, wow, not one thought behind those eyes, little guy. Now that he's all smooth, we're going to bake him. Now for our next step, we're going to be using UV resin and a UV flashlight. I'm going to basically use the UV resin to hold my pieces in place while the pond water that I'm going to be pouring in cures around it. That way the pieces don't move around or float in the resin. Here you can see that little space I made in my lily pad works perfectly. Now we're going to add the fish. I wanted it to look like there was a fish swimming, but it needed a support, so that's where our lily pad stem comes in. I'm just going to use some UV resin to attach it to the bottom of my cube. And everything is surprisingly sturdy. Now I want to make the sand and dirt at the bottom of our pond. I'm going to be using a 2-part epoxy, along with some resin tint and mica powders, some sand, a little bit of rocks, and grass that I got. Mixing that all together and carefully putting it in. I don't want it on the fish or any of the plants. Here you can see what it's kind of looking like. We're going to put this in my pressure pot to get rid of any bubbles as it's curing. Here we're just going to highlight our little froggy smile, and then we're going to clear coat it so it's nice and shiny like a real frog. Then we pull out our mold and check on our first layer, and everything looks great. That means we can move on to the pond water. I'm just using some epoxy. I mixed in some green and blue pigment and added a tiny bit of glitter for that extra sparkle. Then I added a tiny bit of brown because this is pond water after all. Then I'm going to fill up the mold. I'm also making sure to coat the fish. The fish has a lot of detail and bubbles can get stuck to those details. So coating it in resin will make sure there's no bubbles stuck anywhere. Then I can fill it up the rest of the way. I also cured the pond water part in my pressure pot. Now I can finally take this out and see what it looks like. It's taken a lot of work just to get here. And it's always nice when you pull it out and it looks exactly how you wanted it to. Here you can see our little fish swimming around in the water. Now I'm going to sand the top. So when I add the UV resin, it sticks really well, and I'm doing a little test fit with my frog. I want to bring up the resin water layer just a little bit, so that's why I'm using the UV resin. And eventually I'm going to use it to attach my frog to it as well. After flash curing with my UV flashlight, I like to put all my pieces under a UV lamp so they can really cure well. That way I don't have to hold the flashlight as well. Now this is going to be our final UV resin layer, and we're going to stick our frog right down into it. Here I'm just doing the little details. I did a little too much, so I'm just pulling it out with my needle tool. And bing! I got that from KP Creations. She always says that, it's so cute. Now I'm going to clear coat the cube. That way we can see our little fish friend a little bit better, and you can see, now you can see even more detail. I just need to add my brand sticker to the bottom, and I can show you guys the matching grublet that I made for this piece as well. This one I made a full lily pad along with a flower, and I even got the sand layer at the bottom. Thank you so much for hanging out with me as I made the 3rd cube in my cube series. I cannot wait to show you the rest of the designs. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out.